Welcome back. You're still watching Tonight, and we are with the Pope's representative in Kenya, and that is Archbishop Bert van Meegen. Your name is quite difficult.
Yeah, you pronounce it quite well, I would say.
Okay. All right. You were telling me about the role of you as an ambassador of the Holy See, and you've had quite a bit of missions here in the region, actually in Africa. But in the region, what has been your experience, and how does that relate to the work of Pope Francis?
In the larger region, you might say, as you mentioned at the beginning of our interview, I'd been the nuncio in South Sudan. I've also been the nuncio in Khartoum. I nearly spent 10 years of my life in Khartoum. And Sudan and South Sudan are both countries with challenges, let's put it like that. And especially this Pope, Pope Francis, had a special interest in South Sudan. This Pope, maybe you have noticed that a bit, this Pope, Pope Francis, had a special attention for what he would call the periphery. People who live at the periphery, I mean, poor people, refugees, drug addicts, prostitutes, that is all periphery, but also geographically and in terms of development. And surely then South Sudan is one of them. So he had always a very special interest for that country. And he had always been looking forward to a visit to South Sudan. And I'm not sure whether you remember, but we had to postpone that visit once and then twice, also because of his health. And then finally in 2023, we were able to get there. And that for him, that was really a dream come true. He wanted to do that. And that was something which he wanted to achieve, even though already at that time he didn't feel very well, frankly speaking. So.
Right. And as you said that, when you look at his life, what would you say has informed the sort of work he did and the style that he deployed? Is it his Jesuit foundations? Is it the region he came from in the world? What would it be?
Yes, I think both, by the way. Of course, he is Argentinian. Then he was called, or he felt the call to become a Jesuit in 1953, if I'm not mistaken. And he felt that was a call of a God who was very merciful with him, who was able to forgive him for his sins or mistakes or weaknesses, and in spite of all that was ready to take him, so to say. In fact, the slogan, the motto, which is under his coat of arms, Misericordiando et eligendo, means as much as, while being mercy, you were chosen. So to say, I did that out of a grace. He felt that as a grace. So that attitude, which he felt, that privilege, that grace which he received from God, the way he felt it, that was also something which he wanted to give to others again. So therefore also there was this attitude in him of being merciful with others and to say, I know there are problems in your life, I know you're struggling, I know that maybe even according to the rules of the church you shouldn't even be with us, but I choose you. You remain with me. That was typically Pope Francis.
Right.
And then there were two influences. So that was a very personal aspect. And then there was the influence, of course, as you mentioned, of the Jesuit spirituality. A word which comes back, returns many times in his speeches would be discernment, which is typically just the Jesuit Ignatian to say discernment is, I try to, in my prayer, to feel what is the right decision? How does the Holy Spirit move in my heart so that I may take the right decision in my life? That is discernment. And then on the other hand, he was also a political man. And he was very much influenced by the political situation in Argentina, by Peronism, by Juan Perón, who had been one of the presidents in Argentina, who had developed a kind of, there's a bit of a discussion how to call it, but I would still say kind of socialism, socialist system. And Bergoglio at that time, Bishop Bergoglio, identified very much with that system, the system of El Pueblo, of the people.
Right.
It is the people who are in charge. We serve the people. We are here for the people. And the people for Perón and also for Bergoglio was the working class,
right.
The people who work. So to say, in a sense, you might even say you can only be a member of the people at the moment that you work.
Sure.
that you produce something, and that you produce as much as you want to consume. So there was the thing of you have to work, a working mentality. And that is something which was also very strong in Pope Francis. That was a man who worked day and night.
Let's talk about, because when you have world leaders, especially those that head governments, they will relate with other countries with certain conditions. And if you don't follow those conditions, then there would be sanctions. The Pope has been speaking quite strongly against the ills or the vices that exist in the society, whether it's about corruption, it's about hurting the poor. But then, even if to reflect on his message when he was in Kenya in 2015, there's no clear way of monitoring whether what he has shared as his message is being implemented. How does that leave the church?
I do think, and I would say especially again in the last years, that the church is following up more keenly on issues of corruption, of the preferential option for the poor, more attention for the youth. That is something, I have to say, where the church in Kenya at times also still has to grow. But where I feel that especially nowadays they are picking up much more on that than maybe some years ago. And also very much influenced once again by Pope Francis. I feel, and you know, that is also a personal witness I feel, is that of course there has always been in the church that awareness that Christ lives in the poor, and Christ himself was born into a poor family, and that we have to fight oppression. It's about education, it's about human values. By the way, even about the right of the women, you know. All that existed already in the church. But many times it went a bit on the back burner. People would forget about it. Right. Now, what Pope Francis did is he brought it into the front again. And he started to underline this. There's not one speech in which these kind of issues would not come up. And he would repeat it ad nauseam, as they would say in English, that you would get sick of it, so to say, as a free translation. But I think that was really the message, the core message of his pontificate, which came also, by the way, from his own background. If you read his biography, there's a biography, an autobiography that came out at the beginning of this year, actually just 2 months before his passing away now, Spera, which means as much as hope, in which he explains that he is from this Italian migrant family. His grandparents came from Piemonte, which is northern Italy, traveled all the way to Argentina at the beginning of last century. And they had to start from scratch. There was nothing. They were poor, and they had to start from the bottom, so to say. And so he feels very much, therefore he identifies also very much with refugees and poor, and with the people, with the working class who have to struggle to keep their head above the water.
And now, of course, there would be a succession because the church has laid out the process that is supposed to be followed. And you must have seen even some of the print media talking about time for an African Pope. Is this a legitimate expectation? Is it even possible from how you know the church?
Is it a legitimate expectation? Sure, very much. I feel, actually, we had a discussion with somebody in Holland, a friend of mine who's a journalist there yesterday. And in fact, we had that same discussion even with the Pope a year and a half, 2 years ago, where I put it to him, said, Your Holy Father, you know, we have to start thinking about this. Let's say at the moment, probably about 1/3 of the Catholics in the world are from Africa. But if I look to Rome and to the Roman Curia, I don't see that kind of representation within the Curia. The Curia, though they are opening up, there are more Africans than before, there are a bit more Asians than before, but it's still very slow.
Right.
In many ways, that Curia is white. And I do feel that we need to have this kind of proportional representation. And that in that context, it should also be possible to have an African Pope. Is that going to happen this time around? My bet is as good as yours, or yours is as good as mine. That is very difficult to guess that at the moment.
Right.
Actually, when we had the last conclave, where at the end Pope Francis came out, I had put my bet very strongly on Cardinal Turkson from Ghana, whom I know personally. Nowadays, having learned my lesson, let's put it like that, I become a bit more careful.
Okay. And Kenyans have also been asking, because we won't have a cardinal voting, bearing in mind that Cardinal John Jue is above the age of 80. We have not had an appointment recently, of course, by Pope Francis. What does that say, and what does it take to have a younger cardinal appointed in a country?
You know, even to a nuncio, up to a certain extent, that is a mystery, because we are not involved.
Yeah.
I have no clue that works in many ways through very direct lines. What happened, for example, with Pope Francis was at times a bishop would go to Rome very innocently. He might have an appointment with the Holy Father on some issues. He leaves. And the Holy Father is so fascinated by that bishop, sees so many qualities in him and says, okay, that guy is going to be a cardinal. Mm-hmm. And we are, as a nunciature, we are the last ones to hear that. We hear it from the radio or the TV. It's really a privilege, a prerogative of the Holy Father to appoint that directly. Mm-hmm. And so I would be, of course, being nuncio in Kenya and being very much in favor of the Catholic Church in Kenya and identifying very much with that church, I would be very much in favor of a new cardinal in Kenya. And I could mention you 2-3 names, yeah, which of course I'm not going to do. But yeah, we hope maybe that with a new Pope we will get that.
Okay, all right. And of course we'll be watching that process of electing a new Pope, which should happen, they say, about 2 weeks or so after the funeral?
Yes, so the funeral is tomorrow. Normally the counting goes from the death of the Pope. Mm-hmm. 15 days to 20 days after the death of the Pope, the conclave should start. Okay. Now, probably it's going to be the 5th of May. Then the conclave would start, the meeting of cardinals there in the 16th chapel. So if everything goes well and the conclave is not too difficult, then you would expect within 2-3 days a new Pope. Okay. So by the 8th or the 9th.
All right. Thank you so much. We have to leave it at that. Archbishop Bert van